Britain says it'll use every hour that's left to get people out of Afghanistan after the US refuses to extend its airlift deadline beyond next Tuesday. Huge crowds persist outside Kabul airport. Day and night, people wade through human sewage to try to get airside to flee.
Is it worth it? Is it better just staying here in Afghanistan for the moment?
There's no way we can stay here. The Americans should shoot us or let us through.
With just 6 days left until the Americans leave, we'll be asking how imminent is the UK withdrawal, also this evening. The mother of Claudia Lawrence, who went missing 12 years ago, says she's in utter shock over a new police search for her daughter.
I prayed daily for answers, even if they're bad. I prayed daily for something.
Researchers say booster shots of the COVID vaccine may be needed after a study suggests waning protection for the double jabbed after 6 months. We have a special report from the seaside town of Rhyl, where poverty levels are among the worst in Wales. And Dame Sarah Storey wins the first British gold at the Paralympics in Tokyo, the 15th gold of her career.
Coming up in Sports Day, later in the hour on the BBC News channel, it's been a brilliant day for England's cricketers, bowling India out for just 78 runs in the third test.
Good evening. The government has promised to use every hour left to help as many people as possible escape from Afghanistan before US troops withdraw at the end of the month. Nearly 90,000 people in total have now left the country. Latest figures released by the Ministry of Defence show that more than 10,000 people have been airlifted out of Kabul by UK forces since August the 13th. Of that number, more than 6,300 are Afghans and their families. A further 2,000 Afghans who are eligible to come to the UK remain in the country. From Kabul, our Afghanistan correspondent Secunda Kamani and camera operator Malik Mudassar sent this report.
Shame on them.
They've been through so much already, now wading through sewage in the hope of somehow being able to leave this country. Huge crowds are still flocking to Kabul airport, under the watch of American and British soldiers. Despite the dirt, the dust, the gunshots and the chaos, people are still coming here. And they're coming here in their thousands. Here, a makeshift camp has sprung up. Most of the people gathered don't have permission to board an evacuation flight. The few that do are struggling to make their way inside.
We've been waiting here for 6 days and 6 nights. The American embassy told us to come here, but we can't get past all these crazy people.
Is it worth it? Is it better just staying here in Afghanistan for the moment?
There's no way we can stay here. The Americans should shoot us or let us through.
Yesterday, the Taliban said they're not in favour of Afghans leaving. We saw no sign of them preventing people where we were, but they're clearly frustrated with the scenes unfolding. With time running out, there's a sense of panic amongst those trying to escape.
You know me, here's a lot of...
Many worry they'll be left behind, like this former British Army interpreter who's yet to receive a response to his application.
And it's very dangerous for us, because from the day that the Taliban entered Kabul, I've changed my home 3 times. So we are just 2 days or 2 nights. We are living in one place.
He's only got one document from the British Army, and it doesn't even say who signed it. But we managed to find his former boss, now a retired soldier in the north of England.
I absolutely remember him as one of about 8 interpreters I worked with out in Afghanistan on my tour. And like all of the others that I worked with, he was a brave, bright, intelligent lad who actually genuinely wanted to do better for his country.
The British government says no one's life should be put at risk because of their support for the UK's efforts in Afghanistan, and that it's working around the clock to relocate as many eligible Afghans as possible. So are other countries, but these are the last days of those efforts, and many who want to leave are set to be left behind. Sikandar Kamani, BBC News, Kabul.
Well, after the US rejected pleas from European leaders to extend a presence in Afghanistan beyond August the 31st, time is fast running out for the UK airlift at Kabul airport, as British troops are likely to leave ahead of US forces. The Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab wouldn't spell out an exact timetable for the British operation, but there are suggestions it may have to end as soon as Friday. Our defence correspondent Jonathan Beale has more.
Already exhausted, but these British troops know that time's running out. Still trying to help as many as possible, but the window's fast closing. And soon they'll have to think of their own departure.
The Americans have got to be given time to get out after we have pulled out. It's about 48 hours in which they've got left to actually extract people before they have to start focusing on their own extraction.
Western forces are still trying to have to worry about their own security to complete that extraction. Aircraft have been firing flares as a precaution to avoid the potential danger of surface-to-air missiles. But securing the perimeter of the airfield as forces draw down will be a battle in itself.
The longer we stay, starting with the acute and growing risk of an attack by a terrorist group known as ISIS-K, an ISIS affiliate in Afghanistan, which is a sworn enemy of the Taliban as well. Every day we're on the ground is another day we know that ISIS-K is seeking to target the airport and attack both U.S. and allied forces and innocent civilians.
They're no longer being called the enemy, but the Taliban are waiting at the gate and still controlling access. Some may look more professional, but there are reports of people being beaten on their way to the airport. The big question now for foreign governments is what kind of country will the Taliban control?
The Taliban has professed a whole range of and made a whole range of undertakings. I think the reality for us is to be able to engage, not recognise, not confer legitimacy, but engage and test whether they're serious about wanting to live up to those assurances, and being very clear about what the international community will do if they are, and what they will not do if we see the barbaric practices of the past.
It is not like any other withdrawal. When British troops and US Marines left Helmand in 2014, they had months to carefully prepare, and they were handing over to friendly Afghan forces. In contrast, this is being described as the most complex evacuation in recent times. And as one military officer put it bluntly, it'll soon be time to get the hell out of Dodge. Jonathan Beale, BBC News.
Our Chief International Correspondent Lise Doucette is in Kabul for us. Lise, we heard from the US today that nearly 90,000 people have now been evacuated. But what hope is there for the people who are still there?
And what a staggering number that is. And that doesn't include the people, the Afghans who were taken out by the British that you mentioned, the Germans, the French, the private charters, the huge effort worldwide. It's so astonishing how people have opened up their hearts, raised huge amounts of money to get people out. And today we're seeing on social media photographs of these huge transport planes paid for by well-meaning people around the world. And they're half empty. Sometimes they've got just a few people on the plane, because as the window closes fast, it gets ever harder even to get to the airport. We spoke to a Taliban spokesperson this morning who was unsympathetic and unequivocal that the Afghans should not be leaving the country, and that there was only one route out, and that was through the Americans. And we're hearing that in these last days, the Americans are prioritizing American passport holders, green card holders, and sending away those who have these special visas which were established for vulnerable Afghans like those who had worked for the American military. But I think we have to remember that once the US, the UK evacuation stops, once the last aircraft turns off, Afghanistan doesn't pack up and go. The neighbours and near neighbours will have an interest in helping this country's buses to run again, flights to aircraft to fly, and the roads to be open for Afghanistan to start getting back on its feet.
Lise, thank you. Lise Doucette there reporting from Kabul. The mother of Claudia Lawrence has said she is in total shock after it emerged that police have begun a new search for her daughter at a popular fishing spot near York. Claudia, who worked as a chef at York University, disappeared 12 years ago. Danny Savage has this report.
What happened to Claudia Lawrence? A search of these former gravel pits, now used as fishing lakes near York, may finally answer that question. For 12.5 years, Claudia's family has been living with the torment of her disappearance. Police believe she was murdered. Today, her mother spoke about the latest search.
I think there might be a light at the end of the tunnel there. I hope so. But just as a mum, it's the thought that somebody's might have done something to her, and the fact that it's taken 12 years.
Claudia Lawrence was last seen alive walking down this road on the way home from work. She lived in this terraced house here, just a few doors down from the Nag's Head Inn, where she would often meet friends for drinks. The last known conversations she had, though, were on the night before she disappeared, and they were chats on the telephone with her mum and dad.
I'm in another world. I'm in a total shock. I wish I'd been prepared a bit more for it, other than on the day, because I'm certain this didn't just happen on the day. It must have been known about.
Claudia's father, Peter Lawrence, died earlier this year, not knowing what had happened to his daughter. Joan Lawrence says her faith has helped her.
I mean, I prayed daily for answers, even if they're bad. I prayed daily for something, and I know they will come.
Something has changed in this investigation to lead to this new search, but police won't elaborate on where any new information has come from. For Claudia's family, this is another agonising twist in this 12-year mystery. Danny Savage, BBC News, York.
The latest government coronavirus figures show that there were 35,847 new infections recorded in the latest 24-hour period, which means on average there were 33,828 cases per day in the last week. The most recent figures show there were more than 6,500 people in hospital with the virus yesterday. 149 deaths were recorded in the past 24 hours, with an average of 106 deaths a day in the past week. On vaccinations, 87.9% of adults in the UK have now had their first jab, and 77.4% have had two. Protection against coronavirus starts to reduce within 6 months of people being fully vaccinated with the Pfizer or AstraZeneca vaccines. New research by experts working on the Zoe COVID study suggests that booster vaccines will be needed. Our health correspondent Sophie Hutchinson has this report.
More than 3/4 of adults in the UK have now had 2 doses of a COVID vaccine. But how long that protection lasts is a crucial question. Sarah Lesniov, a head teacher, received her second dose in April. But in June, after her family all caught the virus, she became infected too.
Obviously, I'd been shielding at home. I'd been staying in different rooms, keeping doors and windows open, wearing masks in kind of communal areas of the home. So I'd hoped not to get it with my double vaccine, but I knew there was always a possibility of getting it. It was obviously very disappointing to get it in the end. My symptoms were just like those of a heavy head cold, really. I didn't have to stop working. I was working from home throughout that period. I had to rest a little bit more than usual, but I felt like it was a much lighter version than I had the year before.
Sarah's one of a growing number of people who've been infected despite being double jabbed. Today's study by the Zoe COVID team adds to evidence that vaccines lose some effectiveness over time. It found protection from infection with both the Pfizer and AstraZeneca vaccines reduced slightly within 6 months of the second dose. But for most, the vaccines still seem to prevent severe disease.
What this study tells us is that we have to keep an eye on the level of immunity and track it as time goes on so that we can make a prediction 1 month, 3 months, 6 months into the future of when a booster might be required.
And infections have been rising sharply in some parts of the UK. Scotland, where schools have gone back, hit another record high today. Well over 5,000 new cases, with more than a third among teenagers and children.
If I was to write a whole number as a fraction...
Experts are warning the new term is likely to be difficult.
So I think we do need to be braced for a challenging period. Exactly how high the numbers will be, it's very, very challenging to predict that. Where I think we can be more confident is that levels of mortality are going to remain low because we have study after study that still shows the vaccines are working.
Cornwall's rocketing rates of infection have been blamed in large part on a music and surfing festival. Preparations are well underway for this weekend's Reading Festival, where thousands will gather. And where there are crowds, there's likely to be COVID. Sophie Hutchinson, BBC News.
The time is just after 6:15. Our top story this evening. Britain says it'll use every hour that's left to get people out of Afghanistan after the US refuses to extend its airlift deadline beyond next Tuesday. And it's a sensational start for England in the third test against India at Headingley.
Coming up on Sports Day in the next 15 minutes on the BBC News channel, the Harry Kane transfer saga is over for now. He says he's not going to leave Spurs this summer and is 100% focused on helping the team.
The cyclist Dame Sarah Storey moved a step closer today to becoming Britain's most decorated Paralympian after she won Britain's first gold medal at the Paralympics in Tokyo. The gold was the 15th of her career and she broke her previous world record in the process. In total, Great Britain claimed 6 medals on the first day of the Games. Our sports correspondent Andy Swiss has been watching the action in Tokyo.
A golden start from one of Britain's most golden athletes. For Dame Sarah Storey, it seems winning is just a way of life. Storey arrived here with 14 Paralympic titles, and the 15th was never in doubt. In the pursuit, she'd set a world record in qualifying, and her All-British final against Crystal Lane-Wright was more a victory procession as she caught her teammate with laps to spare.
And Dame Sarah Storey.
Nearly 30 years after her Paralympic debut, Storey just keeps getting better. She needs just one more gold from her 2 remaining events here to become Britain's most successful Paralympian. And for her husband Barney and children Charlie and Louisa back home, the pride was only too clear.
Yes, as soon as she came quite close to Crystal, I was like, I know it, she's going to win. It was totally worth it. And I was like screaming my head off for her.
It was absolutely superb, and it's quite surreal in some ways. Being so many thousand miles away, and kind of still enjoying that amazing experience of seeing Sarah win again.
And there was another medal in the velodrome. Steve Bate, who's visually impaired, and his pilot Adam Duggleby beaten by the Netherlands. But silver wasn't a bad consolation. A glittering start for the cyclists then, especially for Dame Sarah Storey, for whom history now beckons. And there was more British success to come, as across Tokyo at the Aquatic Centre, the medals were soon mounting up. They weren't quite the colour they might have been, though. Tully Kearney says she had to learn to swim again after missing the Rio Games through injury. But with a huge lead in her final, she seemed on course for a remarkable triumph. But over the final length, gradually she was reeled in. If it was the 199 metres freestyle, she might have won. But it was the 200 metres, and agonisingly she didn't. Pipped by China's Zhang Li, still silver for Kearney, but oh so close to gold. It wasn't the only near miss for Britain's swimmers. World champion Reece Dunn was involved in a thrilling finish in the butterfly before being just edged out. But with a silver for him and a bronze for 18-year-old Tony Shaw, the sight of Britain's Paralympians on the podium is already becoming familiar. Andy Swiss, BBC News, Tokyo.
The use of tasers by police needs to be reviewed to prevent officers from losing the trust of the communities they serve. That's the warning from the police watchdog. The review of the devices by the Independent Office for Police Conduct found that black people were more likely to face a taser and that some officers were not considering the risk of injury to vulnerable people. Our Home Affairs correspondent Tom Simons has more.
Put it down, mate.
These days, the police are wearing cameras which show clearly what they do when under pressure. A taser generates up to 50,000 volts. That can be reasonable force in threatening situations. But the police watchdog wanted to know, is it being used safely and fairly? Darren and John Sullivan are not armed robbers, but police believe they were.
We was driving along, talking to him, and I suddenly heard a thud. Looked out as a police car round us, guns at the window like that. And we pulled over, and they said, out, out. And I just had new knees operation. And they dragged me out. I said, I can't lay on your front. I said, I can't lay on my front, I've had new knees. They had an officer on each arm. I said, I'll turn round and lay me back. As I turned round, they tasered me and threw me on the ground.
The kind of incident which resulted in today's report. In 101 cases resulting in a complaint, 71% involved white suspects and 22% black, disproportionate, according to the report. In 58% of the cases, there were mental health concerns about the suspect. In a quarter, the watchdog found police officers had a case to answer about their conduct. A key concern is the use of tasers not for personal protection, as in this training, but to make suspects comply, or just to make them stop. Last year, a police officer chased a suspect onto Hammersmith Bridge there and onto a towpath. He used his taser, the suspect ended up in the Thames, and he was tasered another 4 times. This report says too often the police are not considering the safety aspects of using their stun guns. The watchdog wants a rethink in police training, especially when assessing whether a suspect might have hidden vulnerabilities. Elected police commissioners agree.
The misuse of tasers when somebody is in mental health crisis is not just a tragedy, it is a preventable tragedy, and better training, better awareness, better humanity would prevent that from happening.
But police chiefs have dismissed today's report as vague, unfair even. They say tasers are used correctly most of the time. They save lives. Some chiefs want every officer to carry one. Tom Simons, BBC News.
Let's take a look now at some of today's other news. The England captain, Harry Kane, has announced he won't be leaving Tottenham Hotspur during this transfer window. The striker, who's contracted to Spurs until 2024, has been the subject of intense transfer speculation all summer. Manchester City had previously confirmed that they were interested in signing him. The Unite Union has elected its first female General Secretary, Sharon Graham, who takes over from Len McCluskey. Unite is the Labour Party's biggest trade union funder. Graham's appointment has been welcomed by the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, who came under criticism from her predecessor. The online food delivery company Just Eat says it's creating 1,500 new customer service jobs in the northeast of England within the next 12 months. The staff will be based at a new office in Sunderland as part of a £100 million investment in the region over the next 5 years. The government is holding a public consultation on whether beavers should be reintroduced to England's rivers, as has already happened in Scotland. The creatures were hunted to extinction in Britain 400 years ago. Beaver dams create wetland habitats, which act as natural flood barriers, but the National Farmers Union warns the animals can damage trees and impede drainage from farmland. Thousands of lives could be harmed if more isn't done to reduce regional inequality in Britain. That's according to a report by the Salvation Army. The government says it's investing billions in what it calls its levelling up agenda. Our social affairs correspondent Michael Buchanan reports now from the seaside town of Rhyl, which has 2 of the poorest neighbourhoods in Wales.
We want Rhyl to be associated with quality in the future. We're committed to making sure we've got high quality attractions.
It's great to get the tourists in, but what about the people that actually live here? People need to come sort of 3 or 4 streets back and see where the poverty is.
This water park is the epitome of Rhyls regeneration, a £17 million attraction built by the County Council. It's constantly busy and defines a new vision for the town as a quality tourist destination.
I think you'd be hard pushed to find many resorts across the UK that's invested this sum of money into a seaside resort on the back of a recession and now just coming out of a global pandemic. So I think things are looking really bright for Rhyl.
Just minutes away, a different pool in a different world. The new water park is too expensive for this family, a common complaint in a town with high levels of deprivation. Today's report says towns across Britain need to work harder to engage and listen to local communities to ensure regeneration provides lasting benefit to residents.
I would say at least 75 to 100 families a week we help out.
This local charity says the pandemic has exacerbated and revealed levels of poverty that aren't being prioritised in discussions about Rhyl's future.
If people actually came that were making these decisions to somewhere like this, in 10 minutes we could give them a rundown of what we see daily, and maybe the money wouldn't be going to make the front look pretty, but actually maybe put into where it's needed.
The pandemic has been devastating. In an instant, the tourism stopped, a lot of the caravan parks shut. So those jobs that people rely on were just instantly, in one fell swoop, gone.
Susie Taylor works for the Salvation Army, helping people find work.
Never call yourself just a cleaner.
Claims for universal credit, already high, rose 50% during the pandemic. Any new investment, she says, should focus on creating decent jobs.
There's a lot of agency jobs, and they just don't give the financial security that people need to be able to move on in their lives and to see that there is more to life than benefits.
The UK government says improving living standards is a key focus of its investment in regional towns and cities, who'll all benefit from new funding. In Rhyl, they wait and wonder if the ripples from such schemes will wash beyond the seafront. Michael Buchanan, BBC News, Rhyl.
England have made a flying start on the first day of the third test against India at Headingley. After choosing to bat, India were dismissed for just 78 runs. A short time ago, England had reached 110 without loss. That's a lead of 32 runs. Our sports correspondent Joe Wilson has been watching.
England's players wore their T-shirts with messages of diversity and inclusion at Yorkshire County Cricket Club, where a report into allegations of racism against a former player, Azim Rafiq, is yet to be published. It is long awaited. England's captain and Rafiq's friend, Joe Root, is adamant the messages mean something, mean everything. And so to the Test match, and to the procession. Indian batsmen came in, edged the ball to the wicketkeeper and left, time and again. When the captain did it, special celebration. The kind of reaction Virat Kohli himself employs in happier times. Not an England bowler who'd disagree with that today. Ollie Robinson dismissed Rishabh Pant. Controlled aggression is the big idea. Little more India's captain could do now except count. Is that Rohit Sharma? Could that be 67 for 6? Yeah. And this here, with Joe Root stretching catch, was 78 all out. A job perfectly done, but still half done. Now England had to bat. Hasib Hamid starting the innings. Well, that seemed to be working. A new opening partnership with Rory Burns. Want another one? There we go. England were past 50. They hadn't lost a wicket. Now, is it possible that a day of Test cricket could run quite this smoothly? Well, the answer to that is basically yes. Play is coming to a conclusion behind me, with England now 114 without loss, both opening batsmen past 50. Now, Reeta, I'm aware this is only day one, but from England's point of view, day one could not have gone any better.
Thanks, Joe. Joe Wilson there. Time for a look at the weather now. Here's Thomas Schaffenacker.
Reeta, thank you. Good evening. It was a beautiful day across many parts of the country, and in western Scotland, in Tyndrum, the temperature got up to 27 degrees Celsius. Well, 26.8 to be exact. And you can see on the satellite picture how sunny it was across Scotland, Northern Ireland, and many other areas here. And this higher temperature is a result of the light winds here, the prolonged sunshine. Also, orography has something to do with it as well. This is what it looks like early in the morning. There's very little change in the forecast. We'll see clouds developing through the night and drifting off the North Sea, a bit like last night and the night before. Now, there is a cool front over us tomorrow, and that's introducing fresher air from the North Sea, and in fact the Norwegian Sea. You can see that breeze along that coast. That's going to keep things cool and quite cloudy from eastern Scotland along that North Sea coast to East Anglia. So here temperatures could only be around 16 degrees Celsius, whereas towards the west, where we've got the lighter winds and the sunnier skies, temperatures into the 20s. 23, for example, could be the warm spots in Cardiff. So that was Thursday. This is Friday. More of the same. We're just looking at various areas of cloud being pushed by the breeze, light breeze within this area of high pressure. Temperatures, I think, somewhat lower on Friday, particularly here around western Scotland, maybe around 20 or so. We'll match that in London and in Cardiff as well. Now, Saturday and Sunday is looking very similar. I'm going to skip that and go straight to Bank Holiday Monday. And look, the high pressure is still with us, so there's no change at all in the forecast. And this is what I was talking about yesterday if you tuned into the weather. Lots of settled weather with temperatures into the low 20s. And the thinking is into Tuesday, Wednesday, maybe into Thursday, the high pressure will continue to bring us fine weather.
Many thanks, Thomas. A reminder now of our top story. Britain says it'll use every hour that's left to get people out of Afghanistan after the US refuses to extend its airlift deadline beyond next Tuesday. Well, that is all from BBC News at 6, so it's goodbye from me. And on BBC One, we now join the BBC's news teams where you are. Bye-bye.